I'm ready to go. You're just enjoying fellowship too much. So last week we left off discussing about angels and their gender, if they had gender at all. As I consider it more and more, I'm thinking that most likely there is no gender, period, for angels. They're spirit beings, and as Pam had mentioned last week, that gender, you think it's a physical trait, because you think about God having created man in His own image. He created them male and female. That's a physical trait, and to further that, his having created male and female, for this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife. And then He gave the command to Adam and Eve, and also, the others, that they were to be fruitful and to multiply. Well, that implies procreation. It specifies procreation. That's something that we look at. Angels, neither, as we saw last week from Luke, that Jesus said that on the resurrection will be like as the angels, and neither marry nor given marriage. Okay, so that the very fact that as the angels neither give nor given marriage, they don't marry, therefore there's no gender. Now we did take note that every case that when they appear as humans, they appeared as men. And so the idea being, well, they must be male gendered then, if that's the case. Well, not necessarily, because we speak of the Father as Him. Of course, the Son relate as Him because he became as a man. And of course, the Holy Spirit we speak of as Him as well. So it's just that's accommodative because of the structure of language. Now, there's a point to that too, as we look today further. Regarding, look at Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6. There is a few verses here that just causes one to wonder, what in the world is this talking about? Verses 1 through 4. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Now here's it's a lot of different things, but they're all related. In the one case, you have mankind multiplying, that is growing in population, having daughters, and then there were sons of God who looked at the daughters of men, and they chose wives from those daughters of men and married. And then you also had giants in those days, but also after the sons of God came and married the daughters of the men, that they bear children, and these children became mighty men of old, men of renown. So it's like, what is this like? Is this like well, here is a teaching that is false. I want to address that today. The idea that fallen angels, of course, angels. We know that angels are spirit beings created by God. And we know that there are certain angels that rebelled against God, Satan among them and his demons, okay? And so they rebelled against God and were cast down to the earth. And so as they see this, they look at the sons of God as these fallen angels, and that they married or they took to them wives of humankind, bare children, and from these children came these giants and mighty men of renown. Okay, so that's the thought regarding that. Has anyone ever heard this before? It's false. It's not right, and we'll look at why. First of all, let's look at who were the sons of God. What's the first thing we think of when we think about sons of God?
Holy men.
Holy men? Okay, that's because you're trained. That's because you studied, right? Let's look at, okay, that's the right answer. Not necessarily men, though, but let's holy beings. Let's look at Job chapter 1, and you'll recognize this right off the bat. Job chapter 1. In verse 6, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And we look at this meeting between the sons of, I say between the sons, but as the sons of God and Satan were there. And the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? And there's none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man that feareth God, and escheweth evil. Of course, we know that Satan accuses Job of being righteous, fearing God for a good reason, because God protects him. And so we understand. But there's a reason these came together, and we see that they're the sons of God and Satan. Well, we know this can't be men, because men do not have access to the presence of God. So these must be being heavenly beings. We see angels. So in this case, the sons of God, by the context, clearly it's that these sons of God are angels. Satan also, who's also an angel, but notice how he's classified separately from the sons of God. That gives us a clue that these sons of God were these angels, heavenly beings, and Satan was also there, who was also an angel, but not classified as a son of God.
It's a cross-reference through my concordance or whatever it is in the back of my Bible. Job 32:9 says, great men are not always wise, neither do the aged understand judgment. Therefore I said, hearken to me, I also will show my opinion.
That was Job 32:9.
32:9. Let's see what it is.
So great men are not always wise, neither do the aged understand judgment. Therefore I said, hearken to me also, that will show mine opinion.
So that's talking about great men.
Might even give an understanding.
We gotta find out his context.
Well, this is, let me see, Job is answering.
Or men of many years.
I'm sorry, what?
Keynote on mine says men of many years.
Okay. Great men or aged understand? Okay, many years, okay. So Job is going to give an answer to his three friends about his perspective of what's happening to him and why he is innocent, he's completely baffled about what's happening to him, but he has no reason to be. He's giving answer to these three men who are his three friends, so-called, who are accusing him of having done something atrocious because of how he's suffering. But here he's giving an answer to them. I'm not sure that, but I don't see as far as how this relates in that passage on Job 1, the sons of God. But we do see that they are sons of God, that they're angelic beings, and Satan was also there, who was also an angel, but now is no longer classified as a son of God. Okay. Now look at 2 Peter chapter 2. Peter writes a little bit about angels. Second Peter 2, verse 4. We've referenced this before in our studies. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them to the chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and he goes on from there, showing how God is going to judge those, and also how he delivers the righteous out of calamity. God is able to knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment, to be punished. Now, but he makes this notion, for God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell. Okay, so as we think about who are the sons of God, and in the case of Genesis chapter 6, who are those sons of God? And so they look at this passage and say, well, obviously it's these angels who were cast down to the earth who had these desires for human women. Okay, and look at Jude chapter 6, verse 6, pardon me. Jude verse 6. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains unto darkness and the judgment of the great day. So there again, the angels which kept not their first estate, just like those who had, so they had left their own habitation. And so you tie this together with the sons of God, with Job's sons of God, and you put that way back in Genesis chapter 6 with those sons of God. Say, see, the angels came down to the earth. They procreated with daughters of men, and you got these giants and the great men of renown. And so that's the theory. But let's look at some things about the term sons of God. In Deuteronomy chapter 14. Deuteronomy 14. To show that sons of God is not always talking about angels. Verses 1 and 2. Now note that the term was sons of God that is used. And here we see in this passage, ye are children of the Lord your God. Ye shall not cut yourselves nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. So this is a pagan religious practice that they were not to do. Verse 2, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God, and the Lord had chosen thee to be a peculiar people, or people for his own possession, unto himself, above all the nations that are upon the earth. So they were children of the Lord. They were God's children, you know. And the respective, as we think about who were the sons of God, in the case of Job, it's clear they were angels, angelic beings. In the case of Genesis, sons of God doesn't necessarily mean angels. In fact, we consider sons of God is always talking about those who fear God, those who are the sons of God never referred to those who are evil, neither men nor angels. So those evil men or evil angels are not going to be called sons of God. It just makes sense. So it would be the fact that these angels came down to the earth having left their first habitation to procreate with human women, as though they're with women, then that would be a sinful act. Just there, it's clear they couldn't be called sons of God because they were way outside his it's sin. Okay.
Sure, I missed something. But if they're called sons of God, why is that not connecting the gender to them? Because it's calling them sons of God.
Right.
Not beings of
Okay.
God, or not calling them
Well,
sons.
they're in, okay.
And
When you're using a feminine pronoun or feminine adjectives or whatever it is, it's explicit about, you're talking about the female. Okay? When you're using the masculine pronouns, it could either be just men or it could be men and women. Okay, like for instance, God created man, right? Well, he also created women, but women is also included with man. God created man, both male and female. Okay, that's just when you
it doesn't say God created angels both male and female.
right, and there's something to that too. We'll look at that in just a moment. But the point I'm trying to bring up is that sons of God is always referring to righteous ones, whether they be angelic or whether they be men. So then those sons of God who took up of the daughters of men and procreated were not angelic because they could not be referred to as sons of God. What about the daughters of men? Who were they? Well, that's easy to figure out. But more specifically, it is the sons of God refers to a kind of person. That kind of person who loves God and does His will, right? A son of God is one who loves God and does His will, whether it be angelic or whether it be mankind. Now, daughters of men, what's this distinction between, it's determined, okay, it was a different class of person that was separate. So let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. Okay, look at verse 1 to introduce the whole topic. When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them, and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son, for they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. So here we are, that as they enter into the land, they're to have no mercy on the inhabitants, because God had already judged them. He's using the Israelites as his agent to bring judgment upon the people of the land of Canaan. Remember when God had promised the land to Abraham, he could not give it to Abraham then because their iniquities had not been complete. They had not grown to full maturity as far as evilness is concerned. And so God was not ready to bring judgment upon them. At this point, God is bringing judgment upon them and obliterating them, basically, and he's using the Israelite nation to do so. So what they are doing is righteous. So people look at that, well, God tells them to go destroy and completely annihilate people? Is that not genocide? Isn't that terrible? Well, genocide is terrible. But here's the case where, by inspiration, we know that God is judging these people, and God is righteous. So their judgment is right. And God using the Israelites to do these things is right, so that their annihilating that people was the will of God, and it was the right thing to do. So there's no discrepancy. There's no problem with God being a just God. There's no problem with they're just fulfilled. They're as an agent of God, just like the sheriff is the agent of our society to enforce justice. And so it is the nation of Israel was God's agent to enforce justice, okay, enforce his law, bringing justice and judgment upon them. Now then, as he gives them commandment, he says you're going to destroy them all. And you're not to make any covenants with them. Don't get any agreements with them. Okay? And you don't marry their daughters. And you don't give your daughters to marry them. What's going to happen if your sons marry their daughters? Their daughters are going to influence your sons, and they'll cause your sons to turn away from me and to worship their gods, the pagan gods. That brought them the condemnation they had received already. And so you don't let your sons marry the daughters of men, basically. Take that concept. Let's look at a couple other things. Look at Judges 3. Judges 3, verses 5 and 6. Remember, the Israelites were God's chosen people. They were sons of God, as it were. Okay? And they're saying, don't let your sons marry the daughters of men. And in Judges 3, verses 5 and 6, and the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, Hittites, and Amorites. See, the problem was they didn't annihilate everybody. They didn't annihilate everybody like they were commanded to. And so the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, Hittites, and Amorites, and Perizzites, and Hivites, and Jebusites. And they took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and served their gods. Exactly what God told them not to do. They did it anyway. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and forgat the Lord their God, and served Baalim and the groves, and the groves. Therefore the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of Chushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the children of Israel served Chushan-Rishathaim 8 years. That's a mouthful. Okay, so the fact was, that's exactly what they did, and they served Baalim. They served false gods, other gods. Exactly what God had told them that would happen by marrying the daughters of their sons. Okay, of the people of that land, they married the daughters of men. And they were turned away from God, and God's anger was hot against Israel, and he allowed them to go into captivity to serve the Mesopotamians. Okay. So what I'm getting at then is these daughters of men are these daughters of men who do not fear God, who have other gods. Okay. Now this is not the same incident. This is just familiarizing ourselves with how these different peoples are classified and how the Bible refers to them. Now look at Genesis chapter 5. Genesis chapter 5, and this will help us. What's the point of it? Chapter 6 doesn't just break off. Genesis chapter 6 doesn't just break off with a new topic. It's continuing on with the thoughts of what's going on. In the beginning of Genesis chapter 5, remember Adam and Eve had two sons in particular. They probably had more sons and daughters, but even they had more sons and daughters. But Cain and Abel. Okay, and remember, Abel was a righteous one. He offered his sacrifice according to faith, whereas Cain did not. He offered his grain, which was not according to faith. And God favored Abel, his sacrifices, and he rejected Cain's. Cain's was angry with Abel. Why? Because Cain was doing something wrong. It's so ironic. Cain was the one who was wrong, yet he was blaming Abel for his position before God. And so Cain murders Abel. So now Adam and Eve have another son. Have you seen in verse 1, this is the book of generations of Adam, the day that God created man. In the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam. Called Adam and Eve Adam. Adam merely means man. Okay? So Adam and Eve were classified as man. And Adam called his wife woman because she came out of the man. Okay? That's just was Adam Adam's name, or was Adam just referred to as a man? Okay, and so we see, whereas we think of Adam and Eve as their names. Well, Eve was her name, as we see it, but Adam was more than just a name. It was the name for man. And male and female created he them. So, and blessed them and called their name Adam in the day they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth. Okay, from there we see the generations from Seth following on through the days of Adam. After he begat Seth, there were 800 years. He begat sons and daughters. All the days of Adam were 930 years, and he died. And Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos. I think that's okay. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 800 years. And so Enos, let's see. So Seth died, Enos lived, he had begat Cainan, and Cainan, let's see, he lived 700, begat Mahalaleel, and Mahalaleel, let's see, he begat Jared, and as we see, all of these men, Seth, remember Seth, if you track in Luke, he tracks the lineage of Jesus Christ. Whereas Matthew begins with Abraham, the lineage from Abraham, to fulfill the promise that God gave to Abraham. Luke traces it all the way back to Adam to Christ. And through that lineage, it was through Seth. And from Seth, we see this lineage. And notice, these are all sons of God. Okay? These are all sons of God. And so he's contrasting, when we get to verse 28 of chapter 5, and Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. Okay, and as we go to verse 32, and Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then in chapter 6, he gets to the point of the whole thing. After going through all these generations of these men who were sons of God, in verse 1 of chapter 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them wives, which all they were clothed. So here was a division begin. We see that there were those who were feared God, and there were those who didn't. And as we see later on, verse 5 of chapter 6, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented of the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. Okay, and so he brings on the flood. He instructs Noah to build the ark, and specifics about what he needs to build. But notice the contrast between the lineage from Shem through Noah, and Noah being a righteous preacher, we learn from the New Testament scriptures, and that God had chosen him to deliver he and his sons and the daughters-in-law, to deliver them from the impending destruction of the world, to destroy all flesh, as God had put it. In verse 3, and the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. But notice, because the thoughts of the hearts of men were on evil continually, God makes a statement, My spirit shall not always strive with man. You know, when we think about sin, as James puts it, friendship with the world. If we make ourselves a friend of the world, what do we make ourselves? Exactly. So as man's thoughts turned to evil continually, he became the enemy of God. And as God says, My spirit shall not always strive with man. There was a strife going on because of the man's sins. They were separating him as it was their iniquity, the people of Israel, that their iniquities had separated them from their God. And so it was, that's a universal truth. Sin separates us from God. And so as he sees, My spirit shall not always strive with man, yet his days shall be 120 years. 120 years, I'm going to destroy mankind. That's what he's saying. And so there is a contrast here between the righteous Noah, who was a son of God, and the unrighteous sons of men. And the sons of God, who were righteous before God, saw that the sons of men, those who were not fearful of God, they saw that these women were beautiful. And they liked that, so they chose them as wives. And as we see here, in verse 2, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. In verse 4, continuing on with that thought, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Note that the giants were already there. The giants were not descendants of these sons of God and daughters of men. The giants were already there. And we can see that the Anakim, the Rephaim, and the others are like, look at Numbers 13. Numbers 13. So you remember David and Goliath. Goliath was a giant. There were giants in the days of David, which is about 1000 BC or so. Okay. So if we look at Numbers What did I say that? Yeah, 13. Numbers 13, verses 32 and 33. I can remember that Moses sent 12 spies. 10 of them came back with a negative report. 2 of them came back with a positive report. Say, yeah, they're giants, but we can take them. God has given us this land. Let's go do it. Joshua and Caleb. But here in verse 32, talking about the other 10, and they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up in the inhabitants thereof, or rather eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, so we were in their sight. So there is such a disparity in stature between the men of Israel and those men of the land of Canaan. They called them giants, and we looked as grasshoppers. And so there were giants in those days. The people that area were rather large, we could see. And but we also see from other passages that there's Anakim that were descendants of these. They were all of Anak. They were giants, Rephaim, and other giants, okay? So the fact that there were giants in the days of Noah, so? Okay. Look at Job chapter 30, to go on with the idea of men of renown, men of the name, actually, literally, men of the name, men of renown. Or is that the first nobility? Was that the first that they were, as these men of renown, these descendants from the sons of God and the daughters of men, and they were the men of renown, were they not the base fellows that would have come from just the offspring of the men and the sons and daughters of men, but rather are more noble, having the offspring of the daughters of men and the sons of God? They have a more noble mindset. They were men of renown. But look at Job chapter 30, and verse 8. Well, this is talking about, Job is making an observation, but in verse 8 it says, they were children of fools, yea, children of base men, they were viler than the earth. Was he talking about those this says sons of men, daughters of men? Were they of a class of people that was, as Job references, they were sons of fools, children of base men. They were viler than the earth. And yet these other men of renown, men of the name, were they ones who were more noble in thought? Think about the men of Berea. They were more noble than those in Thessalonica in that they received the word gladly, and they searched the word daily to see whether or not what they were taught was the truth, was so. Okay. So I'm not trying to read into the text here, but I'm trying to look at how the Bible refers to things and to have these outlandish ideas about angels coming down and procreating with women, and you end up with giants. That's how they could become giants and mighty men, is because they were descendants of angels. Well, the problems with this, first of all, we've been looking how the sons of God is used not just of angels, but also of righteous men and women, okay? And the daughters of men is used in a fashion that is, the sons of men and daughters of men both come from mankind that have no place for God. Rather, they're pagan. They follow after false gods and idols. We also remember that angels not marrying nor given in marriage, they don't marry, they don't reproduce. My take on it is that they have no gender. They're neither male nor female, but rather spiritual beings. so they don't reproduce, so that these sons of God in Genesis 6 cannot be referring to angels. Also, the fact that these were fallen angels would not be referred to as sons of God. Remember that sons of God never refer to those who are evil, neither men nor angels. If they're evil, they're not sons of God. So, in 6, the fairy tale story about fallen angels taking up wives with women to produce giants there's no foundation in it. That was the whole point of all this. There's no foundation in that false position. When I first time I read that, I said, I can't believe this. Where do people get up with it? At first, when I was much younger and my faith was very feeble, I wasn't real studied in the scriptures, and I read that and I thought, well, wow, that's really cool. That makes sense. Well, that's not studied. That's from a position from someone who doesn't study. Either one or two reasons. One, that person hasn't studied enough, or two, that person likes wild, fabulous things, the spectacular from his faith. Okay. That's my, when I see that kind of a interpretation of the scriptures, I see that number one, that person hasn't studied deeply enough, and number two is probably looking for the spectacular in his faith. But so I wish Pam were here, because she's the one who pretty much brought up the question about that. But that's a real position that some hold, that giants came from angels reproducing with women. But it's false. Any thoughts or questions?
I know we're sort of almost we're pretty much running out of time, but I just had a few thoughts. As far as like the separation between sons of men, or sons of God, and then daughters of men.
Yes.
This was during a time when, girls just didn't decide, I want to marry this man, and ran off and married him.
Okay.
This was during a time when
Men
the fathers had to give the daughters. So therefore, it wouldn't have been like it wasn't like an interchanging of marriages. It was like the sons went married the women because the fathers gave them. But also, I was reading back in the thinking about how both families came, like all these lineages came from Cain and Seth, right? Or from Abel.
Actually, it was after Cain had murdered Abel, Adam and Eve had another son named Seth. Yeah.
And when they have Seth, Eve, she says, God has given me a son to replace Abel because Cain has killed him, right? Well, Cain ran off and got married, and obviously, based on one of his descendants, Lamech, when he told his wives that he had killed a man, and that if Cain was avenged sevenfold, so therefore we're going to be avenged 77-fold. Obviously, there was still that evil in that lineage.
Okay.
But when Seth was born, it says down here that, and as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. The men began to call on the name of the Lord. So after Enosh, obviously there was a change of, I guess, God's relationship with man.
Okay.
Because after Enosh was born, it says then men began to call on the name of the Lord. So is there a possibility that maybe
there was a falling away completely, you think? I'm not so sure.
I know that whenever you have your genealogies, you're going to have people that are still faithful, even though their fathers or their grandfathers were evil. But there's obviously a separation in Cain's lineage and Seth's lineage as far as spirituality goes.
I haven't really looked at that passage and the significance of it. It says began to call upon the name of the Lord. I'm wondering if there were a time, I don't know. I'm thinking that as Seth had his children, they impressed upon each generation fear of the Lord. I mean, I see this as chapter 5 as, yes, this is the lineage of Seth through Noah. And it's a contrast between what had gone on in the rest of the world. We can see in Romans chapter 1 what happens when men think they're so smart they reject God. I think that's pretty much what happened during the days of Noah, that men rejected God and that they began following other gods. You know, and you had that one lineage that still called upon the name of God, of the Lord. You know, I'm not sure. I don't know if that implies that there was a time that Abel stopped calling. I don't think so. I think Abel was faithful. Well, he did. Yeah, he died. But Cain, of course, he went off. He married multiple wives. He was the first one to do that, marry multiple wives, incidentally. And but as far as, I don't gather that there was. I think that Seth was only one generation. You know, there's Adam and Eve had Seth, and I think Seth continued on in a righteous way, and so did his son, and his son. And Noah, where did Noah get his position where he was so righteous? I think he learned from his father, who learned from his father, and so forth. Does the Bible say that? Well, I know that the Bible does show us that like Timothy received the faith from his mother and his grandmother. When I say received his faith, they taught him the scriptures. And so they passed on their faith to him, and he carried forth their faith. And I see the same kind of thing through these men, through the lineage of Seth. And Seth, who passed on, I think that Seth passed on that faith, and so Noah had a like faith as Seth. Of course, centuries later, but still. I haven't looked at that scripture particularly. That was there a falling away? I don't think there was. At least not with that lineage.
Was Seth or Cain?
With Seth, Cain,
I'm
Cain went way off. Yeah,
Cain's and Seth's
yeah.
lineage.
I think Cain went way off when he murdered Abel, and he was cursed by God. I can't imagine Cain having any fear of, any love of God. I say fear of God. Yes, he was afraid of God, but I don't think he had a love of God. And so you think about the generations from Cain, probably were I can see how that would be the daughters of men. But okay. Thank you for your attention and your questions.